What is up, you guys? It's me, your girl, your Casey. How you doing? So I've actually been on Pinterest for less than a year. It's my first time ever making an account, and the only reason I started it was because my friend, who is also interested in writing and just the whole creative process and art, and who is also my beta reader. Hello there, I know you watching this, judging you for hating those chapters I sent you. But she told me that Pinterest is a great way to visualize your worlds and to find just funny stuff that relates to your characters. So I made my own account, made my boards for characters, for certain worlds. But what I've also realized is that Pinterest has really good writing advice too. So I thought I'd take you guys with me and just exploring some of the good little nuggets, pearls of wisdom out there. Maybe I'll make this a series. I'll sprinkle some memes in here too. Let me know if you guys like this, or that if you learned anything from it in the comments below. And let's go ahead and dive in. All right, here we are. So I've thrown in this little gathering of, what are these called, pins? A mixture of things I agree with and things I definitely do not agree with. But again, this is coming from the opinions, from the mind of someone who hasn't published anything. So you know, not just a grain of salt, like a mountain of salt. You'll be needing that. But here's one that I actually really agree with and that has definitely helped me through all my writing processes. Some of the best writing advice I've ever got was if you're stuck on a scene or a line, the problem is actually about 10 lines back, and that saved me from writer's block so many times. This is something I experience all the time, but the biggest time I've experienced this, I was writing the sequel to my YA project. I have the full manuscript for that right now, but it needs severe editing for reasons I'm going to bring up in this video later. But I was already writing on a sequel because I was on like a big writing high, and I was at this really climactic part of the book. I just ended one chapter, but beginning the next chapter, like everything just came crashing down. It was awful. It wasn't a writing block, just whatever I was writing. This next scene building up this conflict between two girls and this other character, nothing was just going good. Nothing felt right. And I just mean like weeks and months of going through this one chapter that was giving me so much trouble and just nothing clicked. And I'm like, what the heck is wrong with this? So I told myself to take a break from that and just like reread the past few chapters, because if I do say so myself, they were pretty good chapters. And I was so hyped to finish writing them, but nothing was going good. So I was rereading those chapters, and I found out what my problem was, and it was literally 10 lines back. It was in the previous, last paragraph of the chapter I ended up on, before I started writing the chapter that gave me all this grief. In the grief chapter, I just somehow messed up on a big, inconsistency, something I just completely glossed over for like a month. In the new chapter I was writing it as if this intruder who had intruded upon these two girls, I wrote it as if he didn't notice one of them was there because she was hiding, because it was supposed to be like a big surprise element, like, oh, you're in a trap, sir, I'm gonna stab you in the back now because I got the high ground, stuff like that, element of surprise. But what I did not stupidly realize is that on the previous chapter I ended it off with the guy who's intruding upon these two girls barely clearly talking to both of them. Like he knows both of them are right there. And that's why the plot just wasn't going good. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. I had the right piece, but I just turned it the wrong way. So after I made that little tweak, everything just fell together. It was perfect. This is why I like to edit as I write. Like my typical routine is writing a page, taking a little break, then going back to edit that page. Because as a plantser, half plotting, half doing whatever the heck I want, this keeps my writing on track, consistently going back and seeing what I just did. And it saves me from many, many mistakes. Here's another pin. As an editor, here are some mistakes I often see writers make in their manuscripts. I honestly think being an editor is an awesome job. I want to do it. Do I have to get an English degree? Let me know if you know. Problem number 1, overusing tags. Example, how are you today? Asked Samson. I'm okay, muttered Mark. Just okay? Questioned Simon. Did I say Samson or Simon? Oh well. Yeah, replied Mark. I feel that. And also, if you've noticed, each tag was a different verb. Asked, muttered, questioned, replied. I'm torn on this subject because yes, I agree that's too many tags, but I know people who are tired of just the regular said tag, and I know people who are like me are like, that's just a whole bunch of different verbs right there. So are you guys a fan of just keeping it the said and just a very scant amount of different tags? Or do you like this variety of tags? But I think we all agree that is a ton of tags. Tags don't have to go with every phrase, especially in a dialogue just between two characters. Yes. I was thinking of you, John whispered to Elle. Why? It just seemed like something you'd like. Even without tags for the last two, it's clear who's speaking. Yeah, totally. As long as you've identified that there's only two people talking, and with a tag you know who one of those people are, you can guess who the second dialogue line is. But I remember, and I wish I had this book in my hand, I was reading one of the Left Behind books. Don't ask me which one it was. There's like 16 in the main series, but I am not kidding. It was a whole page and a half of dialogue, and it was short, like, responses, because they were having a very heated argument, like, yes, no, what do you mean, talk to me. Very short dialogue like that, and there were no tags. I had no idea who was speaking for a page and a half. It was somewhat beautiful, but also chaotic. On a similar note, people often underuse beats. Most communication happens non-verbally, and you should show that in conversations. I don't know what she means by beats, but if we're talking about nonverbal communication, yes, that's definitely the best of showing and not telling. Like, instead of someone saying, I'm confused, scratching the head, just sweating, like mumbling to themselves, pacing back and forth, that shows confusion more than just telling someone, hey, I'm confused, I'm lost. So good, very good advice. When you change your writing style halfway through the story, this is literally me right now in my YA book, and that's why it's taking so long for me to edit that, even though it's all finished. Because I began that story when I was 16. 16-year-old me was trying to copy the writing style of Christopher Paolini because he was my idol at the time. However, now I am matured and I know what I like more as a reader since I started book 2. I have my own writing style now, which is very less descriptive, very, very fast-paced, not a lot of descriptions about the buildings and the scenery, but a lot of the actions between the characters, that nonverbal stuff. That's what I like to read, and that's what I'm writing now. But because I've changed my writing style, I now hate my YA project because it's stupid. I mean, the story is great, but the writing style, despise. So yeah, this meme is perfectly me, and the expression too, as I'm going back and editing that beautiful ugly book right now. But it's also fun because while I'm editing my YA book, I'm also writing my fantasy project, which is going through its first draft. And since that book is all me, no Paolini, it's beautiful. It's grand. Love it. Legit quick tip number 1. The words feel/felt are a sure sign that you're telling instead of showing. If you notice it creeping up in your pose, find another way to express the same thing. Example, he felt like he was going to pass out. Replace it with, the floor seemed to sway under his feet. That is super good, and I think about that constantly. However, I've also been told by an actual editor who was going over like line edits with me for my YA project when it was so ugly. She was like, never write seem, because it does like the same thing as felt. That's what she told me, and I'm conflicted about that, because I remember her saying it either is or it isn't, like Yoda. Is the floor swaying or is it not? There is no seam. But I'm also like, yeah, there is, because we know the floor is not swaying, but to someone about to pass out, it seems like it's swaying. So I think that's some bad writing advice I got. I'm pro seamed. Question mark exclamation point makes a sound in my head, but I can't describe what it is. This is so true. The closest I can get to it is this sound, but if you ask me what letters and what notes are in it, I can't. No. The fandom. How could you kill my favorite character? The author. I was just playing around with my imagination and everything got intense. Is it bad as an author that I make up fan fiction for my own writing stuff? For my own books? Nah. And this. What's the point of being an author if you don't, play around with the god abilities that you have in this world with these characters? Make them suffer, make them laugh, but make them suffer more. It's all for your pleasure. Now from the thoughts of Neil Gaiman. Advice to aspiring writers. I have no idea what Neil Gaiman sounds like, but I'm going to give him a British accent and hope he has one. If you're only going to write when you're inspired, you may be a fairly decent poet, but you will never be a novelist, because you're going to have to make your word count today, and those words aren't going to wait for you, whether you're inspired to or not. So you have to write when you're not inspired. And the weird thing is that 6 months later, or a year later, you're going to look back and you're not going to remember which scenes you wrote when you were inspired, and which scenes you wrote because they had to be written. I agree with this. I do not believe that the muse, creative muse is a thing. You guys know that song Pumped Up Kicks by Foster the People? One of my favorite bands, love them. I remember learning about this song because it's a peppy song, but it's got some dark meanings to it. And the guy who wrote it made the music, produced it, sung it, all that stuff. He said he wrote that song when he was least inspired, but he had to do it. And it's an amazing song. So I think you can make anything even when you're not inspired to do it. I think it's funner when you're especially inspired to. But I'm also, my practical mindset, I'm like, oh, it has to be written because I want this done and I'm gonna feel so much better when the project is done rather than writing when I'm only feeling like writing. If you like fantasy and you want to be the next Tolkien, don't read big Tolkien-esque fantasies. Tolkien didn't read big Tolkien-esque fantasies. He read books on Finnish philology. It starts with a P. Go and read outside your comfort zone. Go and learn stuff. I'm half and half on this. I love fantasy. I'm writing a fantasy. But I also don't like YA that much, and I'm writing a YA. But I also know, because you know how Harry Potter shifted from middle grade to adult? My YA series is definitely going to be YA for like the first 2 books, and it's going to shift to adult. That's what I'm going for. Or maybe I should just go ahead and do it adult. Decisions. But I am fond of like spreading out of my comfort zone with reading. I mean, I know there's stuff I won't read, like self-help or historical fiction, westerns, erotica, because I'm not gonna read something I don't like just to learn from it. That's bad. That's a bad motto to have, especially if you're in college like me. I want to be happy when I read. Like, I'll go to different genres, but if I don't think I'm gonna like it to begin with, I'm not gonna waste time reading it. Tell your story. Don't try and tell the stories that other people can tell. Because as a starting writer, you always start out with other people's voices. You've been reading other people for years, like Christopher Paolini. But as quickly as you can, start telling the stories that only you can tell. Because there will always be better writers than you. There will always be smarter writers than you, but you are the only you. This just reminded me of that whole write what you know motto for writers. I don't like that because it doesn't apply to a lot of stuff. I'm writing stuff with boats. All my fantasy people, they got boat. I don't know nothing about boats, but I'm learning. I'm more of the write the book you want to read person. That's some good stuff right there. I'll tell you that. My OCs. Me. Angst. Who could have done this to my babies? It's totally me. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to show you guys 10 questions to ask a friend who just read your novel. Me and my friend, my beta reader, we've done this, and it's very, very good. Especially if you look at question number 6. If you had to pick one character to get rid of, who would you axe? It's funny, because the scene I had her read literally had someone getting killed with an axe. Here are 10 questions to ask that will not put your friend in a tough spot, but will give them some useful input on your novel. At what point did you feel like, oh, now the story has really begun? What were the points where you found yourself skimming? Honestly, with me, that's like descriptions. Which setting in the book was clearest to you as you were reading it? Which do you remember the best? Which character would you most like to meet and get to know? What was the most suspenseful moment in the book? If you had to pick one character to get rid of, who would you axe? Was there a situation in the novel that reminded you of something in your own life? I genuinely hope my novel reminds people nothing of their real life, because then I feel so sorry for them. What was the last book you read before this, and what did you think of it? This can put their comments in context in surprising ways when you find out what their general interests are. It might surprise you. And lastly, finish this sentence. I kept reading because my beta reader keeps reading because we're literally reading together, and I'm like craning over her shoulder, and if she stops, she knows she has to face the wrath of Casey. But guys, I think that's a lovely place to just stop off at. Great advice. I hope you guys picked something out of this, picked up something, learned something. It was great just refreshing this with me. I typically write in the mornings, so I'm definitely going to take this with me to bed, think about it, mull it over, vision how I can improve stuff and get ready to write in the morning. I'm at a chapter where I'm excited to write the dialogue that's gonna happen, but I'm also in a new area, so I have to write the area, and like I said, I don't like writing descriptions of scenery, so I gotta get over that. But it definitely helps that we're in the age of the internet, and I have to write about a carpenter shop. Luckily, I can pull up a picture and write what I see in that carpenter shop. But thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, keep writing, my friends.